Hello, this is going to be prep for today, and really what we're going to be doing is very similar to everything that we've done before. As you can see in this diagram up here that we did in class, where we looked at shifting the supply curve up for a tax, and we did that on an inelastic curve there. What I'd like you to do next, first thing in prep, is on page 8. Can you then shift the supply curve, do the same thing on this diagram with the elastic curve? Make sure that you're not drawing it like that, or like that in the middle there, and then see what the effect is on the burden of tax. Next thing to look at is an ad valorem tax. So once you've done that, just pause the video here, do that, then come back to an ad valorem tax. Ad valorem literally means according to the value of the good, and this is often known as VAT, value added tax in the UK, which is 20% on top of the price of the good and service. Now that's very different to what we said before for a specific or flat rate tax, which is the same amount of money no matter what the price of the good is. So that, for example, could be £2. So we're really looking at what the difference is between percentage of the price versus a flat rate tax. So to do that, I've put a list of different goods here on my price quantity axes. I've got my first good for £1. Now, if I've got a 50% ad valorem tax, that would mean that I'm adding 50p. So it would go to £1.50. Now, if I've got £3, 50% of 3, so that's £1.50. If 50% of 3, again, is £1.50, so you're adding up there to £4.50. Now, here you see the gap here was 50p. Now I'm going to have £1.50. So I'm going to have something that's going to have a longer or more significant vertical distance. Really interested in the vertical distances here between the curves. £5, I'm adding £2.50, so I'm going up further. Up here, for example, £7, I'm adding half of 7, £3.50, so I'm going a little bit higher up like that. And what you're going to be seeing is these vertical distances being £3.50 there, that vertical distance is £2.50, and so on. This vertical distance is £1.50. As you can see, my curve is now, it should go up, I hope, if I've drawn it right, it should go up in a straight line. And what we're seeing is a pivot around the origin. And you can see down here as well, if I join those up into my supply curve there, you will see that the shift in my curve is a non-parallel shift, S plus ad valorem tax. Okay, so I'm going to do that. And that's very different to adding on £2. If I were to add on £2 to every good, maybe it would look something like this, and I'd get a curve which would look like that. It would be a parallel. If I do it down here, the two parallel curves, there is the same vertical distance, £2 between each of these curves here. Okay, 2, 2, 2. Right. Given that, now can you draw that on and show what that looks like for an ad valorem tax? And really you're just doing exactly the same thing as you did above here. You're adding that on, and we will go through that in class. Next thing are subsidies. So once you've done that and you've completed the diagram, make sure that you have P2, P2 minus tax, you have the government tax revenue area, all of those things there. It's all complete. Then we're going to be going on to subsidies. Now, subsidies are very similar to taxes, other than we can put this out that a tax makes prices rise, it makes the market size fall. Subsidies do exactly the opposite. Subsidies are grants. It's a grant given by the government to a firm. And often this is for what we call merit goods. We may assume that these goods, unlike cigarettes, unlike alcohol, which are demerit goods, these goods are good for society. So for example, we may choose to subsidize leisure centres. We may choose to subsidize wind farms, anything like that. Let's put, say, price of wind energy, for example, ERGY. And that's going to make prices for consumers go down, and it's going to make the market size go up. So it's exactly the opposite, and that makes it confusing. So we're going to take our diagram. Please do draw with me. What we're going to do first of all is take our standard supply and demand diagram. We're going to shift the curve now downwards. S plus sub. So I've moved this curve downwards by the amount of the subsidy. So let's say for every quantity that's in kilowatt hours, for example, that's per kilowatt hour. For every kilowatt hour, I'm subsidizing £1. There we go. I've put £1 subsidy on, and that's the vertical distance between the curves. Now, what that's going to do is we're going to find a new equilibrium. Now, that should make a lot of sense. If firms are being granted money, they're being given money, that should make sense now that our price in our market has gone down. That I think is absolutely making some sense there. I hope that makes sense. So if you subsidize wind energy will get cheaper for consumers. Let's say that was, for example, £5. I've got no idea how much this costs, but let's say that was £5. Now, we can say that the price does not go down to £4, which would be down here. Now, if it went down to that point, you'd get excess demand. I hope you can see that there's S plus sub and demand curve. There's a gap between them. So we have to go back up to this equilibrium here. That's the equilibrium where that's going to make sense. It's going to have demand is equal to supply. And maybe that is, for example, this is not to scale, I know, but let's say, for example, that's £4.50. Now, we also know that the firm, the price that the consumers pay, and I can say that now, consumers pay £4.50. But what about the firm? Well, the firm's been given £1 for every kilowatt hour it's producing. So in order to find that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up from that equilibrium, go find it up all the way to that curve there. And this point here is going to be adding on, this is going to be P2 plus subsidy. This is what the firms receive having had their subsidy. So this is P2 plus sub, and logically then that's just going to be £5.50. So the firm receives £5.50, the consumer pays £4.50, the consumer has benefited, because they have now a lower price, and the producer has benefited because they're receiving a higher price. Now, what is their price? Well, the producer, if we take that, the producer is getting £4.50 from the government for every good, and then the government is adding on £1 as well. So when I add that together, the total that they get is £5.50. So the producer should be very happy about this. Now, if I then add in total, this is all sounding wonderful, but the amount that it costs the government is quite significant. And we can see then that all of that area at the top there is all money that's being spent by the government on it, which is not good. If we just draw all that around there, this whole area here is all spending by the government. That's £1 times by Q2, which is going to be a lot of money. Okay, let's look at how this works in terms of consumer and producer benefit. So please try and draw this diagram, put those notes away, and try and draw that without looking at this. So draw it out, see if you can get it without looking at your notes. Once you've done that, pause, come back again. Then we can take a look at who benefits. So we can divide this. Now I've added on a tiny little dotted line, you may be able to see that there. And we can show that compared to what we did before, we've got benefits which are slightly different. So this whole yellow area here is going to be the producer benefit. That's the amount that they benefit from having this. So we can call that our consumer benefit. Now they benefit because their price has fallen. So you can see that there. The producer, again, they're benefiting, and you can see that there, producer benefit up there. Now they've benefited because their price has risen. They're also benefiting because the quantity that they're selling has also gone up as well. So that's quite useful. Now if we wanted to add a little bit more on, we could add a V here, and a W here. And we could say something about consumer surplus. So consumer surplus, when we started all of this, was VWP1. Now give it some thought. What's happened to it as a result of the subsidy? Pause, think about it. Okay, and when you're coming back, you should be able to see that there's an extra amount of producer surplus there, and they have the coordinates P2 and Z on the side there. So the total amount of consumer surplus as a result has gone up by P1, W, Z, P2. That's all good. Very happy about that. Our total government spending on this has been P2, X, Z, P2 plus sub X, Z, P2, and you could then section off the producer and consumer benefits as well using each of those. So P2 plus sub X, Y, P1 and P1, Y, Z, P2. So you could section off each of those as well, and you can show what the effect of all of those is. Absolutely very good for everyone other than the government, and we can definitely use that word opportunity cost. What else is being foregone as a result of having to pay for this subsidy? Right, thank you for listening. I hope that now makes sense. I would highly recommend you to sit down now with the two different diagrams and draw a tax out, draw a subsidy out. Keep drawing them out because they are going to get confusing. If you think about it, up from the second equilibrium for a subsidy, down from the second equilibrium for a tax.